Hey, this is Mike Mueller from offroad.com, AUFroad.com. This is my 690 behind me, and I am so excited because I got in the mail all the way from Norway. Just incredible speed, by the way. My order of Twinpegs. And if you don't know what they are, I'm going to show you. But I was excited because I'm going to put them on my 690. I went over to YouTube. There are no videos for install. So let's fix that today. Now, before we get started, this is my 2014 KTM 690. It's going to be the same for any 690 model, any Husky 701 model. Yes, there was a difference in 2019 on to newer, but it's all going to be the same. I am missing my passenger foot pegs. That's something that I do. I usually run a Moscow Reckless 80, and I'll show you how all that plays out. Okay, on your stock foot peg, this is a pivot peg, but it works exactly the same thing as stock. What we're going to do is we're going to take the tension off of the spring. And I stuck a screwdriver on the back side, got a wire in there, and then what I'm doing is I'm basically zip tying it. I'll hold up the foot peg, because that's really easy, right? And I'll hold that up, zip tie it, and then what happens is now my tension is off of that. You can't really tell, but there's just enough tension off of that. You could do the exact same thing with the zip tie. I'm just going to use safety wire. It's a little bit easier. With that done, now what I'm going to do is the tension's off, so I can pull out my clip. Here's the washer. And then I can release the pressure on the pin. Pin comes out. And then this whole thing is going to slide out just like that. There is no tension on the spring right now. So with that, we're going to go over to the workbench. Now for me, what really helped me visualize all this is just putting it together. And so I know at least on this side, this is the right side, I know this is going to be my pivot for this. And then this is going to attach to the bike, and this is going to be my rear foot peg. So it's actually going to sit somewhere like that. And I can tell that this base plate, and it's not marked, but this base plate is very flat on the back and kind of more sculpted and rounded on this side. That means it's facing outside. So it's to the right. And that means this can only go in one way. And our next step, what we're going to do is we're going to put a spring in here, and we've got to put in just a little bit of a spacer. This is an M8 washer. So what I've got to do is remove this bolt. This is an M8 bolt. And what I'm going to do is use just I'm going to say a vise, but it's just really so I can hold everything together. So I'll put this just with a light little clamp. I'm just protecting the finish as well. And then I could take this out. And what we're going to do, I've actually need a little bit of thread lock on that. So let's do that. And then this is going to go in this way, but before I do, it's going to get this washer, and it's going to sit right in there. So what I'll do is I'll actually put this in, I'll do the washer, and then very carefully, we'll put this right on back. Next up is going to be the spring. Now the spring goes in only one way. You want it to stick out a little bit on this side, stick out a little bit on that side, and this is going to be on the back side. So this is the back, this is the front, and we want to have tension as it goes up. If you put it in this way, it's not going to work. It's going to actually fit real nice, but it's not going to have any spring tension. So what we've got to do, and this is why my little vise helps, is I'll put this in here, and then just with my thumb, what I'm going to do is just put downward, inward pressure on it, enough so I can slip that bolt in. And this is my M8. This is going to be a 5mm Allen. We're going to screw that in. I'm not going to torque it yet. We'll screw it in and just see, okay, that works. By the way, I set up my foot pegs. I already did this part. What you're going to do is you're going to determine how much of the spacers you need. That's going to determine which one of the bolts that you need. And then you can put in, the last thing you're going to do is put in these little studs. Now I've already done it on the other side, and I know no spacers for me. So I've put these in, and then these are kind of almost like lock nuts because they go all the way through and they're pushing on this, and they're actually putting tension on these screws. So right now what I could do is I could hack these off, or I could put a nut on the bottom. I might angle grind it. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do yet, but if you want to clean those up, now would be a good time to do that, if you know exactly that's where you're going to go. Okay, next up, we are going to grab the bolts for this. And so as this sits, remember, you've got a shorter bolt, and I'm going to show you why, and a longer bolt. You also have two different spacers to choose from. Now, if you're not running the rear passenger foot pegs and you have nothing else, that's the right spacer for you. If you're running something else, like the rear passenger foot pegs, you probably want this. But I'm going to show you how to check, how to make sure everything's fine. So I'm going to grab the ones that I know that I need. And I've got a short bolt, long bolt. Just remember, and I'll keep saying it over and over again, short bolt goes to the top. And I'll show you why. Okay, so back on the bike, I'm going to call this kind of a dry fit. We're going to start assembling it, and I'm going to take out this. This is going to go right here. It's going to be actually your pivot for your regular pegs. And then what we're going to do, remember I've got a short bolt and a long bolt. Got to make sure which one's which. Okay, we're going to go, that one is definitely shorter. So that's going to go in the top hole. And here's the reason why. You see how much clearance there is? There's not much clearance between the back of this bracket and your swing arm. And of course, your swing arm is going to pivot, go up and down. You do not want any bolt to interfere with your swing arm. And so what you're going to do is have the right amount of spacer, the right amount of bolt. And when it gets torqued down, you should have nothing on the back end, especially nothing hitting the swing arm. That's why the top bolt is a shorter bolt with the right spacer, and make sure you get that right. So these two bolts are going to be the Torx, the 40, the T40, and you're going to need to get this spacer in there as well. So what I'm going to do, remember, we're just kind of, I'm saying this is dry fitting, but we're going to do a little bit more than that. We're not going to take these out. So I thread lock this, I thread lock the other one, and I'm not going tight. I'm just going just a little bit off of tight. So I've got some flexibility. I want things to move, because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in with my foot peg. And so that's going to go in there. I still have tension off of the spring. And so I should be able to get this up right through there, have it go right through my foot peg. See if we can get this on the first try. Almost. And it's a whole lot of jiggling about, but when you get it, it'll go in. There it goes. This bolt is a 7mm, and what we're going to do is we're going to tighten this up, and let me grab that. Whoop. And I still don't want to go all the way tight. What I'm doing is I'm putting upward pressure from the bottom, and I'm just going to get it so it just starts to cinch up. And it's got thread lock on it, and I think we're almost there. Okay, so that is not tight, but just hand tight. Now I'm going to come back here, do the same thing with these guys. And then I want to show you, let me see if I can pull my camera out. Okay, I want to show you on the back side of this, what I'm talking about is this bolt should not come through. You want to make sure that you have plenty of clearance. I know I probably don't have enough light, but I can get an Allen wrench through the back side of there. So I don't even need to see it to be able to tell that's the right spacer, that's the right bolt. Make sure you do that before you go any further. Okay, assuming we've got everything in the right place, in the right way that it's supposed to go. I've checked and made sure that everything that moves is supposed to move. I've got now time to torque the bolts. And you've got a couple of bolts. We're going to start out with the first one we put in, which is this one right here. It is accessed from the bottom like this. And I think that's an M8 bolt. It's got thread locker on it, and it is going to be torqued at 17 Newton meters. My torque wrench goes in positive clicks of like 17 is fine. In foot-pounds, it'd be 12.5 foot-pounds. I can't get to a half. So I'm going to torque that. Next one up, and these both have thread lockers on those. These M8s, I think, as well. And they're going to be torqued at 25 Newton meters. You've checked the clearance on the backside of this one. All your spacers are right. Everything's right. That's going to be 25 Newton meters. If you need foot-pounds, that's 18.4. And then the third one you're going to torque down is the bottom one. And that is the one that holds this foot peg. And that's going to be the big M10 bolt, the bigger of all the bolts. And torque on that is going to be 30 Newton meters. And I think that's 22 foot-pounds if you go foot-pounds. So let's torque all of those up. Each one has thread locker on them. And then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, with all of our bolts torqued, they're all done. Check everything again, make sure everything's fine, make sure you have clearance. Now we're going to do the last thing. Well, almost the last thing. Second to the last thing. Underneath, you just torqued this bolt, but you have a little, and this is kind of a cool little feature. So this is that 4mm Allen. What is that, a cap head screw? I'll call it a cap head screw. And you're going to screw that in, and what that does is, even if this starts to back out and starts to come loose, it's not going to go past that little ridge. That's going to catch it, and you're going to feel a loose foot peg way before that happens anyway. And so both of these, the M10 and the M8, both of them, which are both pivots for both of your pegs, you're going to want to do this. And it's just a little, and I'm going to give it just a little bit more torque just to keep it in there. So that's going to keep the M10 in, that's going to keep the M8 in, and wonderful idea, wonderful system. So I've checked virtually everything. Everything's torqued, everything that moves is supposed to move. I think I'm all set and ready to go give these things a test. The last and very last thing I'm going to do is clip that little spring, pull my little wire out so that I have full spring tension on this, and let's go ride. You know, I mentioned before that I run a rack, and sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes I run this rack, and it sits right on this perch and this perch, and so these two bolts are very active in that. And if I do run the rack, I've got to reduce the amount of spacer that I'm using, use the same bolt size, but I need to allow for this thickness. And so that's just a simple little math. It's not high tech. You just have to reduce your spacer by about that much, and everything will be fine. If you're running the standard foot peg bracket that comes out here, great. You just need to use the shorter spacers. As far as that goes, so let me show you. So I've got, you can see that there's a little bit of a difference between the height, and I want typically, well, let me show you. Here's my boot. And so this is Alpinestars Tech 7 Enduros, and typically I'll ride right about there. I tend to not ride too high. I tend to get more towards the balls of my feet. And as far as spacers go, that's the right amount of spacers for me and my foot on this, even with pivot pegs. It's a fabulous thing. No spacers needed. Depending on what your pegs are, depending on what your riding style is, what boots you're using, all of that kind of stuff, you may need higher or lower spacers. Not lower, because I have none, but you may need an infinite amount of spacers. And they're all available. They're all shipped to you. So little changes that you might want to make along the way, no big deal. Just add in a couple of spacers. But start out with this. See what you think. So far, on just a test fit basis, perfect for me. Sitting down, my feet are on here. Standing up, my heels touch. And that's standing up in the ready position, like I was coming into a whoop section or what have you. Absolutely good feel. I love it. I haven't ridden it yet. That's going to be the next video.